How's it going, guys? Coffee here. Today I wanted to go over my planned League Starter build as well as my rough planned Atlas, which is pretty much to be using Boneshatter in order to do Ultimatum. I truly feel like this is going to be one of the best Ultimatum farming builds out there because of a few different reasons. First and foremost, the Tainted Pact Golden Rule combo does make it to where you are pretty much immortal outside of anything that one-shots you. So as long as there is not a new mod from Ultimatum that makes it to where you cannot leech, which there are no Ultimatum mechanics at this point that actually fully disable a build. So if you actually look at Milky's list of the mods that were on here, everything pretty much on here just reduces things, right? So you have reduced life, so I could see them having reduced leech, but as long as you have any leech whatsoever, you're going to be fine. On top of that, because of the way the Tainted Pact works, getting Choking Miasma is just going to be giving you an even bigger heal. So to give you even extra survivability, I mean, as if the 300k life a second wasn't enough already, but that's beside the point. So going back into it, this is the build. I kind of went over this a little bit with the Slayer Boneshatter here with Tainted Pact. Most importantly, for this version, we are going to be using the Shock Tincture. So this is going to be Shock Boneshatter. So as you can see here, this is the 12% shock on a T16 Essence monster. This is with using Phys to Lightning. So this is only half of the actual damage we would have for our shock in game. So it's going to be basically probably half about of what the actual shock is going to be on the monsters. So as you saw, even with just using a Phys to Lightning along with using the Flask, you are already getting a shock of, on rares, you're getting a shock of 11 to 12%, which, because your shock damage would be all of your damage instead of half your damage, like what you're seeing there, you are going to be getting at least 22%-ish shocks on T16 mobs, and that was with a 630 DPS axe or something at the point. So that's not even as good as the axe that I have even here in the POB. I didn't even bother crafting like a full endgame POB axe on this. The build, as you push it to endgame, if you look around, you can find plenty of examples of people pushing this into the hundreds of millions of DPS. But we're going to go over kind of a league start and basically something for the first 3 or 4 days. So first things first, when it comes to the Warden or the Warlock tree here, or the Affliction trees rather, you are going to be wanting to go Warden. For this, you will want to put your first 2 points into Coated Blade in order to get Tinctures, and then your next 2 points into Nature's Concoction. This is going to be the thing that's going to give you basically permanent uptime on your Flask that is going to be providing you shock chance, as well as increasing the effect of that so that you are going to have basically really close to 50% shock chance as long as you get like a T1 mod on there. With T2, I think it'll be like 45% shock chance or 40% or something, which is still more than enough, right? The shock is going to last 2 seconds and you're attacking, at least 5 times a second. So it will always be up on any bosses or anything like that. After you put your points into this, you have a few different options. If you want to go the more defensive route, Wildwood Blessing will provide you with 150% armor after it stacks up, because you get 1 stack a second and you get 15% armor for every single one. But this does have 25% reservation on it. So this is either something that's going to come in really late game when you're actually setting up with Enlighten, or actually getting like mana reservation on your helmet as an implicit, and then mana reservation again on the helmet craft itself. Or if you want to trade damage for it early on, because of how tanky this build is already, I don't think it's going to be necessary. But they already said it just costs 1 regret to respec these points, so until I feel like I need it, or until I actually find a circumstance where I actually get myself killed, I'm just going to be putting my points in these extra Vivid Whiffs. I am going to pick up Detect Evil. I personally enjoyed the dots from like Metamorph that kind of showed me exactly if there was a pack somewhere that I missed, or a rare or something like that I missed. So being able to see them on the minimap, I enjoy it. I know it's not for everyone. If you don't want Detect Evil, just don't take this and just take extra quantity of Vivid Wasps as well. The Vivid Wasps, if I remember correctly, these are the ones for currency. So just having more quantity of the wisps that are giving currency is never a bad thing. In regards to Oath of the Magi, I don't personally feel like it's worth it to give up any of the sockets that we have, because everything, is really, really important. But if you just wanted some extra life or extra movement speed, you could always go that route. But not going to be the route that I end up going. But that's always an option for everyone else. Outside of that, in regards to the tree, when you are first leveling, you are going to be wanting to be leveling with Spectral Throw. You get Spectral Throw and Volley starting right at level 4 after you complete Mercy Mission, and you pretty much just stick on Spectral Throw until you get to Act 6. So after you finish Act 5 Kitava, you do the Twilight Strand in order to get the gems, and then you have your setup for Boneshatter at that point. And then you'll end up using Boneshatter moving forward from there. I know some people still just continue to use Spectral Throw all the way until about the point where they get to Kitava in Act 10. So that's always an option for you as well. If you don't feel like you have the right sockets or anything for it, then you can go ahead and just stick with that. In regards to your early leveling, as soon as you do move over to Boneshatter, you're going to want to ensure you're picking up Tribal Fury and the Attack Mastery for strike one additional target. And then also pick up Steadfast and the Fortify here for your melee hits to ensure that you are actually getting your Fortify on there. As you push yourself early on, again, you're going to be pathing over to Resolute Technique. And then once you actually get to the point where you're actually gearing and you get enough accuracy, things like that, then you'll actually start pathing yourself over to Precise Technique and out of Resolute Technique. Of course, don't do this until you have enough accuracy, otherwise you're just wasting points and wasting things. For your Anoint, I do highly recommend Toxic Strikes, because especially early on, you aren't going to have the Divines in order to basically guarantee that you can get a Veiled Craft, where you're not necessarily going to have like really good access to a Ashlyn Slam, basically to try to hit the Phys and Poison mod on there. So having extra poison chance is just really, really good in terms of like having the build actually feel better with the Golden Rule Tainted Pact setup. In addition to that, another thing that just also makes things feel a lot better is to run Coralitos. This gives you another 25% poison chance. And then if you still feel like your poison chance is too low, I highly recommend early on, instead of running Pride, you run Herald of Purity and Herald of Agony instead. Your damage will be a little bit lower, of course, because you're going to just have less fizz from it, but compared to Pride, you're not really losing that much, given that Pride, in order to get the full effect on it, needs to be in there for 4 whole seconds. So if we actually go back to Pride and we just call it the initial effect, you can see that the damage difference for like most things is going to be what, 5.5 million versus 5.1 million. So you're losing not even 10% damage to have just even more chance to poison and basically guarantee that you will basically never find yourself in a situation where you're actually going to die. Alternatively, again, you have Berserk on here. If you really need like a big burst in damage and survival, Berserk is always there. But we don't actually leave it on for the POB. In regards to the actual gems itself for Boneshatter, you do want to be running Impale. You don't quite have the points to put it in this Impale Mastery. Typically early on, these are like some of the last points you get, unless you're just going for straight damage really early on. But for those who are not really wanting to do or don't mind having to click their totems more, you can pick up the Impale chance over here before you pick up the Totem Mastery and Panopticon over here. If you look at the damage difference, they're actually fairly comparable. They're pretty much the same with less points over here in Impale Mastery, but being able to have the lingering buffs from Ancestor Totems does feel a lot better. So it really comes down to personal preference for what you want to do. Same thing goes here for like taking Bannerman. You don't really need to do this. It's just like an extra little thing, especially if you don't place your banners. Then you realistically don't need to take this, and you can leave those points and put them in something else early on instead. As you are, because Bannerman is specifically going to be for Pride, right? So if for Bannerman here, if you see with Pride, when we actually have Pride on instead of the Heralds, then the damage you're actually getting from Bannerman is going to be significantly more. But again, when you're not using Pride, you don't need to take Bannerman, so don't take that early. In regards to your totem setup, you want to make sure you're using Ancestral Protector, Ancestral War Chief, and Multi-Totem. You typically won't have the buttons to even use Vol Ancestral War Chief, so don't stress hard on trying to get a Vol version of this. It doesn't really matter. If you are going to be someone who doesn't mind swapping your auras on and off if you ever end up actually dying or something, then you can run Vol AW, but you typically won't have any buttons because of how button intensive this build already is. For your Cry here, you do want to be running Ancestral Cry here, because this is going to basically give you extra targets on your strike, as well as give you some strike range and give you armor as well. And then for your auras, again, early on, you're most likely going to be in this Determination, War Banner, Herald of Purity, Herald of Agony setup for the majority of time, right? It's not going to be until you actually get to your closer to finalized gear that you will actually get to use Pride again. But until then, you just use these 4 setups and you just run your Berserk in your weapon along with your totems over here, and you just basically don't use Brutality at that time because you'll need the sockets in order to put in the Berserk at that point over there. In regards to your cast when damage taken setup, I recommend running a cast when damage taken setup, probably a lower one early on, especially. You want to be running this around like level 6 or 7, something like that. And then just make sure you're running your Blood Rage as well as your running your Blood Rage and your Curse under the level requirement for this. So you have 2 options in regards to how you want to build this or play it. If you are wanting to run Headsman and have 20% culling, this version is going to give you slightly higher movement speed as well as the 20% culling. But if you do end up running this, then you do end up needing to run Punishment Curse, because all of your poisons are going to be reflected back to you because of Golden Rule. So if you are running Vulnerability, then you are going to end up basically bleeding yourself or hitting yourself with like a 200,000 damage bleed that will kill you. If you want to go the route of running Endless Hunger instead of Headsman, you are giving up the 20% culling, but you are getting a setup to where you cannot be stunned and you're unaffected by bleeding. So if you do end up going that route, you can basically drop a point in Unwavering Stance and use that somewhere else. I personally like the 20% culling as well as the extra movement speed, so I am going with the Headsman route, and I'm happy to just be using Punishment. If you see that if we mark the enemy as low life for Punishment, you'll see your damage will go up quite a bit. So that's kind of the trade-off. You'll have a little bit slower on the first half of the mob, but when you get to actually like execute range, you'll be getting them down and cold very, very quickly. All the other things other than that, for your you're just going to be using a standard Leap Slam faster attack setup, and then you'll be running Precision on Arrogance, because you do need to be reserving some life. If as you go to reserve life, it is important that you do end up picking up this Life Mastery first, or very early on, before you start reserving things and trying to use damage on full life, because you do need this Life Mastery in order to do that. So keep that in mind if you are going to be using damage on full life. So once you get to your 6th link, you do need to ensure that you have this, you count as full life while at 90% of maximum life or above. Otherwise, your damage on full life support gem will not actually do anything. So early on, again, until you craft your gloves, just stick with Tribal Fury. Once you've actually crafted your end game gloves here, to where you actually craft these with your Fall Strike target, as well as your poison chance on hit, then you want to end up getting to a setup to where you can drop Tribal Fury and the Attack Mastery, and then you can actually slot in your Cluster Jewel over here, which is going to give you a lot more attack speed and accuracy, which will help again with your accuracy setup for Precise Technique, as well as your attack speed. So your attack rate should go up quite a bit with this. In regards to the flasks and the tincture, the way that we are again getting the shock on this, we are going to be running our tincture between our Quicksilver flask and either our Granite or our Jade, whichever one has our shock chance on it, so that you basically have that extra shock chance. If you just want extra defenses, then you run your shock tincture between your Jade and your Granite instead of your Quicksilver. There are a couple tinctures that they have not actually showcased yet. Let's see if we can find these here. So if you see here, there is a Rose Thorn tincture, Boreal Wood tincture, and Bloodsap tincture that we don't actually know what they do yet, so this may change, but it's going to be hard to find a tincture that's going to basically be giving us more than 25% more damage, right? So finding something that's going to be better than shock is probably not going to happen. So I'm thinking this is what it's going to be, but if one of those new tinctures ends up being really, really good, I'll of course make a build update and I will let you guys know. So again, the reason why I think this is the Ultimatum build and the reason why I'm going to be playing it is because of the really, really high survivability. Again, outside of getting one shot, which if you've seen the endgame versions of this build, you can face tank basically every single attack in any of the Uber bosses, no problem, and have plenty of survivability and no issues whatsoever. So because of that, I'm thinking this build is going to be very, very comfortable for it. Pretty much the only mod that you even need to actually play around and not just be face tanking everything and standing still is going to be Ruin. But Ruin, as long as you have any movement skills, is not really that hard to work around. I played a Cyclone Gladiator the whole time through Ultimatum without any issues, so playing melee is not a problem. Yeah, other than that, if you have any questions about the build, leave them in the comments down below and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And other than that, see you in the next one.